Hey, good day, everybody, and welcome to Rocky Mountain Readings, where we have been going hard into the wonderful classic work by the RAMBAM, The Guide for the Perplexed. It's a profound and deep book, discusses a lot of points that might seem out of date to today's scientific standards, but I like to push it from the vantage point of intellectual virtue, understanding how the RAMBAM's logic is working, functioning, and putting into play the reality of creation out of nothing and the correctness of Torah. So, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful, voluminous work. We've provided a link if you want to follow along, get a free copy of this. On this wonderful website, The Guide for the Perplexed. They got it in 3 different versions, in a PDF, HTML, or a Kindle. We are reading from the Kindle edition, and we are at 52% of the book, page 5909, chapter 18 of section 2. Yeah, it's got 11,467 pages in the Kindle edition, and we're only on just below 6,000. Good day, Toma. Welcome. Hope you're enjoying the discussions. Yeah, and we hope you're all blessed. If anybody's got any questions or concerns, feel free to message me personally or drop a comment in the chat room. I'll always try to look at it. I'll definitely look at it and try to address it and get a response if it's warranted. But try to stay on topic. Yeah, so let's see what ground we can cover today. Chapter 18. The first method employed by the philosophers is this. They assume that the transition from potentiality to actuality would take place in the deity itself. So they consider that change, which cannot be applied to Hashem if he produced a thing only at a fixed time. And this is why I keep holding the position when I had my God over time site, and I keep trying to share that you cannot put Hashem under the tick-tock of a clock. The refutation of this argument is very easy. The argument applies only to bodies composed of substance, the element that possesses the possibility of change in form. For when such a body does not act for some time and then acts by virtue of its form, it must undoubtedly have possessed something in potentia that has now become actual. So when they say Hashem created out of nothing, there wasn't the potential for creation prior to its beginning. And the transition can only have been affected by some external agent. As far as the corporeal bodies are concerned, this has been fully proved. Good day, Ashley G. Welcome in California. But that which is incorporeal and without substance does not include anything merely possible. Everything it contains is always in existence. The above argument does not apply to it, and it is not impossible that such a being acts at one time and does not act at another. This does not imply a change in the incorporeal being itself, nor a transition from potentiality to actuality. The active intellect may be taken as an illustration. According to Aristotle and his school, the active intellect, an incorporeal being, acts at one time and does not act at another, as has been shown by Abu Nasser in his treatise on the intellect. He says there quite correctly as follows. It is an evident fact that the active intellect does not act continually, but only at times, and yet he does not say that the active intellect is changeable or passes from a state of potentiality to that of actuality, although it produces at one time something which it has not produced before. For there is no relation or comparison whatever between corporeal and incorporeal beings, neither in the moment of action nor in that of inaction. It is only by homonymity that the term action is used in reference to the forms residing in bodies and also in reference to absolute spiritual beings. The circumstance that a purely spiritual being does not affect at one time that which it affects at another does not necessitate a transition from potentiality to actuality. such a transition is necessary in the case of forces connected with bodies, it might perhaps be objected that our argument is to some extent a fallacy, since it is not due to anything contained in the active intellect itself, but to absence of substance sufficiently prepared for its action. And we got to keep in mind that he has he's clearly already defined time as an accidental property of matter. When once matter exists and space exists, the distance between necessitates time. In order to measure, you need to have length, height, depth. Time becomes an accidental property of creation. Ashley started into the last noun magazine. Well, I'm glad you like it, Ashley. I spent a lot of time on it. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I can do lots more. It's just it wasn't given the financial support to make it viable, and I had a lot of interest and a lot of excitement in Israel over those magazines, and we had over 75,000 views on the 2 editions, over 35,000 on the first edition, and over 5,000, nearly 50,000 on the second, for sure. I keep track of it on those links. Exciting stuff. When the action does not continue, it is owing to the absence of the substance sufficiently prepared and not to any change in the intellect. I answer that it is not our intention to state the reason why Hashem created at one time and not at another. And in referring to the active intellect as a parallel, we do not mean to assert that God acts at one time and not at another, in the same manner as the active intellect. An absolutely spiritual being acts intermittently. We do not make this assertion, and if we did, the conclusion would be fallacious. What we infer and what we are justified in inferring is this: the active intellect is neither a corporeal object nor a force residing in a body. It acts intermittently, and yet whatever the cause may be why it does not always act, we do not say that the active intellect is passed from a state of potentiality to that of actuality, or that it implies the possibility of change, or that an agent must exist that causes the transition from potentiality to actuality. We have thus refuted the strong objection raised by those who believe in the eternity of the universe. Since we believe that God is neither a corporeal body nor a force residing in a body, we need not assume that a creation after a period of inaction is due to a change in the creator himself. So he's trying to get across true virtue when you're thinking about Hashem. The second method employed in proving the eternity of the universe is based on the theory that all wants, changes, and obstacles are absent from the essence of God. Our refutation of this proof, which is both difficult and profound, is this: every being that is endowed with free will and performs certain acts in reference to another being necessarily interrupts those acts at one time or another in consequence of some obstacles or changes. Example: a person desires to have a house, but he does not build one because he meets with some obstacles. He has not the material, or he has the material but is not prepared for the purpose on account of the absence of proper instruments, or he has the material and instruments and yet does not build a house because he does not desire to build it. Since he feels no want for a refuge, when changed circumstances as heat or cold impel him to seek refuge, then he desires to build a house. Thus, changed circumstances changed his will, and will, when it meets with obstacles, is not carried into effect. This, however, is only the case when the causes of the actions are external. But when the action has no other purpose whatever than to fulfill the will, and the will does not depend on the existence of favorable circumstances, the being endowed with this will need not act continually, even in the absence of all obstacles, because there does not exist anything for the sake of which it acts, and which, in all absence of all obstacles, would necessitate the action. The act simply follows the will. And so he's trying to talk about, the state before creation, there was no nothing that could impose upon Hashem the need for creation except his own will. Okay, but some might ask, even if we admit the correctness of all this, it is not change interrupted in the fact that the will of the being exists at one time and not another. I will reply thus: the true essence of the will of a being is simply the faculty of conceiving a desire at one time and not conceiving it at another. In the case of corporeal beings, the will which aims at a certain external object changes according to obstacles and circumstances. But the will of an absolutely spiritual being, which does not depend on external causes, is unchangeable. And the fact that the being desires one thing one day and another thing another day does not imply a change in the essence of that being or necessitate the existence of an external cause for this change in the desire. Similarly, it has been shown by us that if a being acted at one time and did not act at another, this would not involve a change in the being itself. It is now clear that the term will is homonymously used of man's will and the will of God, there being no compassion whatever between God's will and that of man. The objection is refuted, and our theory is not shaken by it. This will we all desire to establish. The third method employed in proving the eternity of the universe is this: whatever the wisdom of God finds necessary to produce is produced eo ipso, but this wisdom, being his essence, is eternal, and that which results from his wisdom must be eternal. This is a very weak argument, as we do not understand why the wisdom of God produced 9 spheres, neither more nor less, or why he fixed the number and size of the stars exactly as they are. So we cannot understand why his wisdom at a certain time caused the universe to exist, whilst a short time before it had not been in existence. All things owe their existence to his eternal and constant wisdom, but we are utterly ignorant of the ways and methods of that wisdom, since, according to our opinion that God has no attributes, his will is identical with his wisdom, and all his attributes are one and the same thing, namely his essence or wisdom. More will be said on this question in the section on providence. Thus, this objection to our theory falls likewise to the ground. Yeah, when we get into the section on providence, does it ever really get into discussions on the complete and utter sovereignty of Hashem, for sure. There is no evidence for the theory of the eternity of the universe, neither in the fact cited by Aristotle, the general consent of the ancient peoples when they describe the heavens as the habitation of the angels and of God, nor in the apparent concurrence of scriptural texts with this belief. These facts merely prove that the heavens lead us to believe in the existence of the intelligences, i.e., ideals and angels, and that these lead us to believe in the existence of God, for he sets them in motion and rules them. We will explain and show that there is no better evidence for the existence of a creator, as we believe, than that furnished by the heavens, but also according to the opinion of the philosophers. As has been mentioned by us, they give evidence that a being exists that sets them in motion, and that this being is neither a corporeal body nor a force residing in a body. Having proved that our theory is admissible and not impossible, as those who defend the eternity of the universe assert, I will, in the chapters which follow, show that our theory is preferable from the philosophical point of view and expose the absurdities implied in the theory of Aristotle. Chapter 19. It has been shown that according to Aristotle and according to all that defend his theory, the universe is inseparable from Hashem. He is the cause and the universe the effect, and this effect is a necessary one, and as it cannot be explained why or how God exists in this particular manner, namely being one and incorporeal, so it cannot be asked concerning the whole universe, why or how it exists in this particular way. And that's what physicists try to do, though, right? For it is necessary that the whole, the cause, as well as the effect, exist in this particular manner. It is impossible for them not to exist or to be different from what they actually are. This leads to the conclusion that the nature of everything remains constant, that nothing changes its nature in any way, and that such a change is impossible in any existing thing. It would also follow that the universe is not the result of design, choice, and desire, for if this were the case, they would have been non existing before the design had been conceived. We, however, hold that all things in the universe are the result of design and not merely of necessity. Keep that in mind. That's a big statement. He who designed them may change them when he changes his design, but not every design is subject to change. For there are things which are impossible and their nature cannot be altered, as will be explained. Here in this chapter, I merely wish to show by arguments almost as forcible as real proofs that the universe gives evidence of design. But I will not fall into the error in which the Mutakalamim have so much distinguished themselves, namely of ignoring the existing nature of things or assuming the existing existence of atoms or the successive creation of accidents or any of the propositions which I have tried to explain and which are intended to establish the principle of divine selection. You must not, however, think that they understood the principle in the same sense as we do, although they undoubtedly aimed at the same thing and mentioned the same things, which we also will mention when they treated the divine selection. For they do not distinguish between selection in the case of a plant to make it red and not white, or sweet and not bitter, and determination in the case of the heavens, which gave them their peculiar geometrical form and did not give them a triangular or quadrilateral shape. The Mutakallamin established the principle of determination by means of their propositions, which have been enumerated above, part 1, chapter 73. I will establish this principle only so far as necessary and only by philosophical propositions based on the nature of things. But before I begin my argument, I will state the following facts. Matter is common to things different from each other. There must be either one external cause which endows this matter partly with one property and partly with another, or there must be as many different causes as there are different forms of matter common to all things. So, grasp the logic he's saying that matter, matter has to consist of properties, combinations of properties. There has to be commonality. So he's postulating atomic structure before the notion was even understood scientifically. When he says matter is common to things different from each other, in other words, all matter has some sort of composition at its core. There must be either one external cause which endows this matter partly with one property, partly with another. Either that it's a complex matter, or primary elements. He's discussing that like the periodic table are primary elements, partly with another, or there must be as many different causes as there are different forms of matter common to all things. This would unfurl things in a total different fashion. You'd have to take the number of spots on the periodic table and then put it to the power of 2 and 3 and 4 and it starts to get real goofy after that. This is admitted by those who assume the eternity of the universe. After having premised this proposition, I will proceed with the discussion of our theme from an Aristotelian point of view in form of a dialogue. You have proved that all things in the sublunary world have one common substance. Why then do the species of things vary? Why are the individuals in each species different from each other? And that would be, the Aristotelian view would say, because the composition of things formed of that substance varies. For the common substance at first received 4 different forms, and each form was endowed with 2 qualities. And through these four qualities, the substance was turned into the elements of which all things are formed. The composition of the elements takes place in the following manner. First, they are mixed in consequence of the motion of the spheres, and then they combine together. A cause for variation arise then in the variation of the degree of heat, cold, moisture, and dryness of the elements, which form the constituent parts of living things. By these different combinations, things are variously predisposed to receive different forms, and these in their turn are again prepared to receive other forms, and so on. Each generic form finds a wide sphere in its substance, both as regards quality and quantity, and the individuals of the classes vary accordingly. This is fully explained in natural science. It is quite correct and clear to everyone that readily acknowledges the truth and does not wish to deceive himself. Since the combination of the elements prepares substances and enables them to receive different forms, what has prepared the first substance and caused one part of it to receive the form of fire, another part the form of earth, and the parts between these two, the forms of water and air? Since one substance is common to all, through what has the substance of earth become more fit for the form of earth, and the substance of fire more fit for that of fire? So there are still, 800 something years ago, very, very deep inquiries into the structure of matter. The difference of the elements was caused by their different positions for the different places prepared the same substance differently in the following way. The portion nearest the surrounding sphere became more rarefied and swifter in motion, and thus approached the nature of that sphere. It received by this preparation the form of fire. The farther the substance is away from the surrounding sphere towards the center, the denser, the more solid, and the less luminous it is. It becomes earth. The same is the cause of the formation of water and air. This is necessarily so, for it would be absurd to deny that each part of the substance as is in a certain place, or to assume that the surface is identical with the center, or the center with the surface. This difference in place determined the different forms, i.e., predispose the substances to receive different forms. So I think what he's discussing is molecular spin and atomic radius, weight. Maimonides says, is the substance of the surrounding sphere, i.e., the heavens, the same as that of the elements? Aristotelian would say, no, the substance is different, and the forms are different. The term body is homonymously used of these bodies below and of the heavens, as they have been shown by modern philosophers. All this has been demonstrated by proof. But let now the reader of this treatise hear what I have to say. Aristotle has proved that the difference of forms become evident by the difference of actions. Since, therefore, the motion of the elements is rectilinear and that of the sphere circular, we infer that the substances are different. This inference is supported by natural science. When we further notice that the substance with rectilinear motion differ in their directions, that some move upward, some downward, and that substances which move in the same direction have different velocities, we infer that their forms must be identical. Thus, we learn that there are four elements. In the same way, we come to the conclusion that the substance of all the spheres is the same, since they all have circular motion. Their forms, however, are different, since one sphere moves from east to west and another from west to east, and their motions also have different velocities. We can now put the following question to Aristotle. There is one substance common to all spheres. Each one has its own peculiar form. Who thus determined and predisposed these spheres to receive different forms? Is there above the spheres any being capable of determining this except Hashem? I will show the profundity and the extraordinary acumen which Aristotle displayed when this question troubled him. He strove very hard to meet this objection with arguments, which, however, were not borne out by facts. Although he does not mention this objection, it is clear from his words that he endeavors to show the nature of the spheres, as he has shown that of the things of the sublunary world. Everything is, according to him, the result of the law of nature and not the result of the design of a being that designs as it likes, or the determination of a being that determines as it pleases. And we still see this argument today amongst the natural sciences. They don't want to hear anything religious, but more than that, in my research, I found they don't want to hear anything that has cataclysm in it. They want their stable design that has no interruption. He has not carried out his idea consistently, and it will never be done. He tries indeed to find the cause why the spheres move from east to west, east and not from west, why some spheres move with greater velocity, others with less velocity, and he finds the cause of these differences in their different position in reference to the uppermost sphere. He further attempts to show why there are several spheres for each of the 7 planets, while there is only one sphere for a large number of fixed stars. For all this, he endeavors to state the reason so as to show that the whole order is the necessary result of the laws of nature, which we still see today with a lot of natural academic sciences. He has not attained for his object. For as regards the things in the sublunary world, his explanations are in accordance with facts, and the relation between cause and effect is clearly shown. It can therefore be assumed that everything is the necessary result of the motions and influences of the spheres. But when he treats of the properties of the spheres, he does not clearly show the causal relation, nor does he explain the phenomenon in that systematic way which the hypothesis of natural laws would demand. For let us consider the spheres. In one case, a sphere with greater velocity is above a sphere with less velocity. In another case, we notice the reverse. In a third case, there are 2 spheres with equal velocities, one above the other. There are, besides other phenomena, which speak strongly against the hypothesis that all is regulated by the laws of nature, and I will devote a special chapter to the discussion of these phenomena. In short, there is no doubt that Aristotle knew the weakness of his arguments in tracing and describing the cause of all these things, and therefore he prefaces his research on these things as follows. We will now thoroughly investigate 2 problems, which it is our proper duty to investigate and to discuss according to our capacity, wisdom, and opinion. This, our attempt, must not be attributed to presumption and pride, but to our extraordinary zeal in the study of philosophy. When we attempt the highest and grandest problems and endeavor to offer some proper solution, everyone that hears it should rejoice and be pleased. So far, Aristotle. This shows that he undoubtedly knew the weakness of his theory. How much weaker must it appear when we bear in mind that the science of astronomy was not yet fully developed, and that in the days of Aristotle, the motion of the spheres were not known so well as were at the present. And that's a big key point when you start thinking about a lot of things. Even in Aristotle's day, a lot of the genealogies of species weren't even categorized. And so when you're dealing with old manuscripts, like I mentioned before, the Plague Project, what they realized is, in the book of Genesis, where it said that the frogs came up on land, and yet if you did a thorough research of that region in the Nile, there is no frogs. Frogs do not exist, but Bufo regularis, toads do, which, people could call toads frogs and frogs toads. The point being they weren't categorized then. And so this leads to what something that when you're looking at ancient texts, something that could be anachronistic. An anachronism is an out of date or an out of time statement. And we see this in Torah when it says that Abram was from the Ur of Chaldees. But the time of Abraham was actually 1,000 years before the Chaldean Empire ever existed. So when they said he came from the Ur of Chaldees, Ur was understood in the Chaldean Empire, but the Chaldean Empire didn't exist really until after the time of King David, King Solomon. Um, so that's called an anachronism. And if one knows what they're looking for when you're looking ancient archaeologically for tangible evidence, knowing what an anachronism is can help. So that's your $25 word for the day, anachronism. Hope it helps. I think that it was the object of Aristotle in attributing his metaphysics, one intelligence to every sphere to assume the existence of something capable of determining the peculiar course of each sphere. Later on, I will show that he has not gained anything thereby, but now I will explain the words according to our capacity, wisdom, and opinion occurring in the passage which we quoted. I have not noticed that any of our commentators explain them. The term our opinions refers to the principle that everything is in the result of natural laws, or to the theory of the eternity of the universe. Or our wisdom, he meant the knowledge of that which is clear and generally accepted, that the existence of every one of these things is due to a certain cause and not by chance. By our capacity, he meant the insufficiency of our intellect to find the causes of all things, all these things. He only intended to trace the causes for a few of them, and so he did. For he gives an excellent reason why the sphere of fixed stars moves slowly, while the other spheres move with greater velocity, namely because of its motion in a different direction from the uppermost sphere. Yeah, he further says that the more distant a sphere is from the eighth sphere, the greater its velocity. Um, yeah, I think, when you try to put that into understanding and you think of orbits and speed, but what scientists have realized today is that not only does our Earth spin, it spins and it goes around the sun in a trajectory. So when you multiply those factors of speed and motion, and then consider that our sun is actually spiraling through the galaxy, pulling all the planets uh, in our solar system, and you compound the math of motion in path, and add it all together, I mean, you start to get into real high numbers close to the speed of light. And it might be why we behold what we behold, rather than us thinking we just spin super slow on the earth. The earth is moving around and we watch. We just had the winter solstice a couple days ago, and now you begin to see the days start to get longer. The winter solstice was the shortest day in the year, and that's from our northern hemisphere. The question of the tilt of the earth balanced with rotational spin. Anyways, the more factors you start to consider, the more the numbers start to magnify. But this rule does not hold good in all cases, as I've already explained. More forcible still is the following objection: there are spheres below the eighth that move from east to west. Of these, each upper one, according to this rule, would have a greater velocity than the lower one, and the velocity of these spheres would almost equal that of the ninth sphere. But astronomy had, in the days of Aristotle, not yet developed to the height it has reached at present. And this can even be said from Maimonides' day to today. His understanding of astronomy and physics in general had not yet developed to the height it has reached at this present. And keep this in mind, nor has it, in its present state, it hasn't reached the height it will be at in another 500 years. And we need to progress and understand all this. But Hashem over time, understands and injects purpose into things to perform that which he sent it out for. Um, yeah. Nonetheless, according to our theory of the creation, all this can easily be explained, for we say that there is a being that determines the direction and the velocity of the motion of each sphere, but we do not know the reason why the wisdom of that being gave to each sphere its particular property. In other words, I look at this as saying some things in its component parts are not what they are as a whole. If you take a car engine, okay, an engine is not the car. The transmission is not the car. They are component parts that give the power supply, that give the drive train. Then you got differentials, and you got spin axles, and then you got tires where the rubber meets the road to propel forward. But understanding limits of and this kind of thinking allowed me to pull back closer and further, and to say sometimes you got to step back to look at the bigger picture rather than just its component parts. At one point, a component part is not part of a and this is why a lot of people in this world seem lost and segregated and separated and alone. But in fact, nobody is cut off from Hashem ever. He is always near and never far off, and he loves you the most. That's why he created everything in the universe. And don't ever feel so condemned in sin, because he created you regardless. He knew about every right or wrong deed you may ever do all your days, but he made you anyways. And he did it for a purpose and a great potential, and I hope to see all develop in it. But know when to zoom out and when to zoom in. When is something like a car or is an automobile is consists of many different components. You can dice things up so small that they're no longer relevant to the whole, and you got to be able to keep that in perspective. So Ashley, when you're looking at that non-magazine, I spent a lot of years researching magnetic anomalies to discover the geologic origin for the South Atlantic anomaly, which I believe invariably proves a flood. The rabbis loved it initially, but then the question of time comes into play. In their question of timing, is very, very difficult to keep all logic together with the strict criteria of everyone's belief. This is where components are so small, everybody's belief is so different. But when it comes to traditional Judaism, when they hold the year as 5782, it's very, very hard to balance everything in existence with their timeline. And I've tried my best to argue or question based on unequal weights and measures, and give them, my case in point scenario based on early proto-Sinaitic script, keeping the same grammatic structure as what existed at the time, whereas early Hebrew Proto-Sinaitic was developed as a type of shorthand to decipher complex Egyptian hieroglyphs. But Egyptian hieroglyphs had markers, they had determinatives and phonograms, but the determinatives were the structure for their sentence, and it's what allowed grammar to develop or it to be deciphered, and they knew how to keep their grammar. But when you put that into a alphabetic system like Proto-Sinaitic was, the first alphabetic system, You have to be able to differentiate the determinatives. And the only way to do such, logically, I came to the assertion, was a case in point study. So I began to look at early Genesis in light of case point, case point. The case is stated, then the points about the case, but you need to recognize the next determinative, say this is now a second case. And I tried to debate the point based on when it says this is the book of the generations of Adam, and Adam lived 130 years. They're saying the determinative was this is the book of the generations of Adam. And when it says and Adam lived 130 years, they're saying the generations of Adam lived 130 years, and he bore a son, and then he continued to live another 900 years. They're not, in fact, saying that one man lived 930 years. If you follow it with determinatives on a case in point basis, if you look at it, and then it's concluded, and he continued. It says that they had unnamed numbered of sons and daughters as the closeout determinative. It's that back end, front end, and back end determinative. I said, if you don't look at it properly this way, what you have in the Torah is you have every line that says that same verse, and he lived so many years and had sons and daughters. The repetitive nature of that statement, you nullify it. Oh yeah, Ashley, it's like walking a tightrope because you cannot please everybody, and the first ingredient in the recipe for failure or disappointment is to try to be a people pleaser. You got to be bold in some cases and willing to step forward, especially if you're trying to further uh, honest truth, valuable evidence. You got to be able to, hold it forward to see if it stands up to scrutiny, because there are so many nuts that just write you right off. Oh, that's crazy. And if you get discouraged easily, you're going to back right off. So you got to learn to punch through certain simple objections. But yeah, I tried to be clear on that, but I cannot get the rabbis to look at anything different than their timeline of the world being 5,700 years. Yet it's not outside of their position that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. It's not impossible according to the majority opinion, but the majority opinion also has too many instant literal views when it comes to their 5,782 year calendar. Too many of them hold that it is the time of when Adam was actually in the garden. And my way of looking at it, believe it or not, actually makes those numbers to actually make those numbers work with the ages from Genesis chapter 5 and chapter 10. The ages mentioned of those long lives, it would make my scenario would make them completely stackable, like a king's list in Egypt, successive. And if you put them stackable rather than parenthetically coexisting, if you make them stackable, it actually goes right back to a point in time that scientists call the Bowling Oscillation, which was the first cold snap to warm weather about 12,600 years ago. And if you look at the story of Genesis in that light and archaeology, it's easier to align it because you can find the dawn. And I've tried to tell rabbis, I said, look, they just found that site in Jerusalem that's 10,000 years old. Many of the Bible lands, like Jericho, is shown to have settlements there dating back to over 9,000 BC. And, then you're into some other arguments that the rabbis just don't want to go down. And, I am of the opinion that Hashem rules it all, and you'll see more of this as we get into the Rambam's view of the sovereignty of Hashem. Um, yeah, yeah, people are often too ready to discount everything if they have an issue with a single point. People don't. Nobody wants to be incorrect, but the pursuit of truth has to carry with it the willingness to adapt, and that means sometimes adjusting thought patterns. But without the evidence laid before our eyes, and without embracing things like intellectual virtue, things are sometimes never going to progress. You can't build um, legitimate theories on straw. They just the whole straw man argument never holds up, and you have to be on guard against imagination. There's been a lot of theories that were postulated that academics have spent hundreds or decades on, only to be discovered eventually as fallacious. But academia moves at such a slow pace. As we can see, a lot of the Aristotelian view was held and is still held today in academia, but they have discarded the eternity of the universe, with discoveries of like the cosmic background radiation, which I mentioned in the magazine. Actually, I try to show you the points that scientists today use to say this is what factually exists. And if you can't account for what factually exists, you know, I am against spirituality at the expense of the tangible. If you have to jettison the tangible to hold your belief system, you're in fallacy. And yeah, nonetheless, let's keep going. According to our theory of the creation, all this can easily be explained, for we say that there is a being that determines the direction and the velocity of the motion of each sphere, but we do not know the reason why the wisdom of that being gave to each sphere its peculiar property. And this is why I was saying sometimes the peculiar property that Hashem gave to something as a part isn't visible for its whole purpose. And this is where I try to encourage you to envision your best life. What is your potential best life, and then break it down to how you can make steps towards it to live that full potential. If you don't think about it and determine it, you're like a leaf blowing in the wind here, rather than actually living. If Aristotle had been able to state the causes of the difference in motion of the spheres and show that it corresponded, as he thought, to the relative positions, this would have been excellent. And this is what we try to see today with quantum physics. They try to look at the motion and the entanglement factors that cause atoms to bind, the gravitational draw, the attraction, and the stacking and the building. And the variety of their motions would be explained in the same way as the variety of the elements by their relative position between the center and the surface. But this is not the case, as I said before. In other words, there's so much data, and we find Hashem has made it that way. There's so much out there that you could learn infinitely and still never compare to his infiniteness. And accepting that position is what, and yet still striving to be the better you, is what truly being human is. There is a phenomenon in the spheres which more clearly shows the existence of voluntary determination. It cannot be explained otherwise than by assuming that some being designed it. And there's laws of attraction in existence, things that we see in magnetism. Positives draw negatives, and vice versa. And this phenomenon is in the existence of the stars. The fact that the sphere is constantly in motion, and we start to think on gravity, while the stars remain stationary, indicates that the substance of the stars is different from that of the spheres. Abu Nasser has already mentioned the fact in his edition to the Physics of Aristotle, he says, there is a difference between the stars and the spheres, for the spheres are transparent, the stars are opaque. And the cause of this is that there is a difference, however small it may be, between their substances and form. And, more than that, I mean, if you start looking at astronomical data, they look at shift, the red shift and the blue shift. One means it's moving towards us, another means it's moving away from us. These are factors which are points on a graph for measurement. So far, Abu Nasser, but I do not say that there is a small difference, but a very great difference, because I do not infer it from the transparency of the spheres, but from their motions. I am convinced that there are three different kinds of substance with three different forms, namely, one, bodies which never move of their own accord, which are the bodies of the stars; two, bodies which always move, which are the bodies of the spheres; three, bodies which both move and rest, such are the elements. Now I ask, what has united these two bodies, which, according to my opinions, differ very much from each other, though, according to Abu Nasser, only a little? Now, Ashley, let me say, I developed some software and was playing around with it, and I tried to convey and look at it the way Maimonides was, the universe. And it becomes very, very easy, like a clockwork, when you put, our planet, and you put the moon rotating in its orbit, based on the spin of the Earth, and then our movement in our celestial orbit linked to the gravitational lock with the sun, and you start to see things flow. This is where you start, almost like a watch building. But yeah, I built some software to show my points that are in that magazine, and I shared them with a few academics. But it got to the point where I'm spending thousands of hours putting things together for somebody to go, oh, and you try to find ways to best and be most effective with your time, energy, and resources. And I have just found the greatest joy to meet B'nai Noach, share the message, and I'll help the rabbis to get a broader footprint in this world. It's been a joy to me to be a part of that, and Rabbi Goldberg has been just so dear to me, and joyfully let me keep going. Yeah, and encouraged. He always encourages me to be bold. Okay, who has prepared the bodies for this union? In short, it would be strange that without the existence of design, one of two different bodies should be joined to the other in such a manner that it is fixed to it in a certain place but does not combine with it. It is still more difficult to explain the existence of numerous stars. In the eighth sphere, they are all spherical. Some of them are large, some small. Here we notice two stars apparently distant from each other, either one cubit. They're grouped of 10 close together, whilst in another place there is a large space without any star. Right, so even when you break this down at the atomic level, there's more space than matter. When you think of neutrinos that pass right through the Earth, and you think of it like a spaghetti strainer, a sieve, what allows for things to block or permit the travel in motion, never mind the causes of the motion, but what can impede motion. Things start to become It is more difficult to explain the existence of the numerous stars in the eighth sphere. They are all spherical. Some of them are large, some small. Here we notice two stars apparently distant from each other. Okay, I read that. Okay. What determined that the one small part should have 10 stars and the other portion should be without any? So they're asking, real intellectual questions that needed to be and have been discovered in science since the time of this writing. But if you get the intellectual virtue and the logic with which to probe, one thing I've always said is the greatest thing a rabbi can ever teach you is how to learn. Never, not what they teach you, but that they teach you how to actually learn, and intellectual virtue has to be in there, or it's not real learning. It's actually can be going backwards in life. And the whole body of the sphere being uniform throughout, why should a particular star occupy the one place and not another? The answer to these and similar questions is very difficult. You start thinking about combination like soup and flavor. What causes the synthesis of flavor to blend, and yeah, certain flavors contrast, certain flavors, work well together, but that's only a preference, right? But when you start thinking of factors of synthesis, what causes things to bind, and what causes things to repel? Yeah, okay. The answer to these and similar questions is very difficult and almost impossible if we assume that all emanates from God as a necessary result of certain permanent laws, as Aristotle holds. But if we assume that all this is the result of design, there is nothing strange or improbable. And this is what I love. I love that analogy he shared yesterday, where he talked about a person whose mother died young, and he was raised on a desert island with his father, and had never ever met a woman. And then asks, where did people come from? And his father tried to explain the birthing process, and his mind couldn't perceive, being conceived in a womb, because you'd be dead from the suffocating, nor would you be able to feed or excrete. I love how he brought that out, because the things are totally different in that scenario, but in stages of design. And I try to be clear that the the theory of evolution, natural-minded evolution, is impossible. Based on random chance, it's impossible. But based on design, is more in line with what actually exists when you see the fractal laws of nature and the way things just birth. You have to consider the design in that it starts to add into the mix, and can synthesize with its environment in a different way. But there's nothing strange or improbable. And the only question to be asked is this: what is the cause of this design? The answer to this question is that all this has been made for a certain purpose, though we do not know it. There is nothing that is done in vain or by chance. It is well known that the veins and nerves of an individual dog or donkey are not the result of chance. Their magnitude is not determined by chance, nor is it by chance, but for a certain purpose. That one vein is thick, another thin, that one nerve has many branches, another has none, that one goes down straight whilst another is bent. It is well known that all this might be just as it is. How then can any reasonable person imagine that the position, magnitude, and number of the stars, or various courses of their spheres, are purposeless or the result of chance? There is no doubt that every one of these things is necessary in accordance with a certain design, and it is extremely improbable that these things should be the necessary result of natural laws, and not that of design. Very important point. So when one understands the growth structure, um, yeah. So people ask, what is life? And if you look at most scientists will get into the discussions about self-replicating systems, but we see that in biology for sure. Where a cell splits, making a self-replicating copy of itself, but it also holds it together in an adhered individual sac, and multiplies, and but following like a DNA template. Um, but even still, environmental factors sway into the mix. They know this based on biology as well. Cellular biology has receptors that the cell can close off to or open up to let nutrients in or keep virus out. Understanding the way things click and connect, contract and expand, growth and receding. Yeah, it's just a ton to explore mentally. That when you start talking about design, you can look at even a painting that's beautiful and say, "Wow, how many brushstrokes did that take?" But it doesn't. It shouldn't take away from the whole of the painting. We should be in awe. This Yira Shamayim, awe of heaven. We need to look at the world in a sense of having a sense of awe, not try to box it all. But the best proof for design of the universe I find in the different motions of the spheres and in the fixed position of the stars in the spheres. For this reason, you find all the prophets point to the spheres and stars when they want to prove that there must exist a divine being. Thus, Abraham reflected on the stars, as is well known in Isaiah 40:26, exhorts to learn from the existence of God and says, "Lift up your eyes on high and behold who hath created these things." Jeremiah calls Hashem the maker of the heavens. Abraham calls him the God of the heavens. Moses, the chief of the prophets, uses the phrase explained by us, "who rideth on the heavens." Okay, important points. The proof taken from the heavens is convincing for a variety of things in the sublunary world, though their substance is one and the same, can be explained as the work of the influences of the spheres or the result of the variety in the positions of the substance in relation to the spheres, as has been shown by Aristotle. But who has determined the variety in the spheres and the stars, if not the will of Hashem? To say that the intelligences have determined it is of no use whatever, for the intelligences are not corporeal and have no local relation to the spheres. Why then should the one sphere in its desire to approach the intelligence move eastward and another westward? Is the one intelligence in the east and the other in the west, or why does one move with great velocity and other slowly? This difference is not in accordance with their distance from each other, as is well known. We must then say that the nature and essence of each sphere necessitated its motion in a certain direction and in a certain manner as the consequence of its desire to approach its intelligence. Aristotle clearly expresses this opinion. We thus have returned to the part from which we started, and we ask, since the substance of all things is the same, what made the nature of one portion different from another? Why has this sphere a desire which produces a motion different from that which the desire of another sphere produces? This must have been done by an agent capable of determining. We have thus been brought to examine two questions. Is it necessary to assume that the variety of things in the universe is the result of design and not of fixed laws of nature, or is it not necessary? Two, assuming that all of this is the result of design, does it follow that it has been created after not having existed, or does creation ex nihilo not follow? And has the being which has determined all of this done always so? Some of those who believe in the eternity of the universe hold the last opinion. I will now begin the examination of these two questions and explain them as much as necessary in the following chapters. Are you guys finding this interesting, or is it just too slow and too boring? Oh, real low number of viewers today. No questions on Facebook. All righty. All right, chapter 20. According to Aristotle, none of the products of nature are due to chance. His proof is this: that which is due to chance does not reappear constantly nor frequently, but all products of nature reappear either constantly or at least frequently. The heavens, with all that they contain, are constant. They never change, as has been explained, neither as regards their essence nor as regards their place. And you throw in the question of deep time. Yeah. But in the sublunary world, we find both things which are constant and things which appear frequently, though not constantly. Thus, the heat of fire and the downward tendency of a stone are constant properties, whilst the form and life of individuals in each species are the same in most cases. All this is clear. If the parts of the universe are not accidental, how can the whole universe be considered as the result of chance? Therefore, the existence of the universe is not due to chance. The following is, in short, the objection of Aristotle raises against one of the earlier philosophers who assumed that the universe is the result of chance and that it came into existence by itself without any cause. Some assume that the heavens and the whole universe came into existence spontaneously, as well as the rotation and motion of the spheres, which has produced the variety of things and established their present order. This opinion implies a great absurdity. Whoa. They admit that animals and plants do not owe their existence or production to chance, but to a certain cause, be that cause nature or reason or the like. They do not assume that everything might be formed by chance of a certain seed or semen, but that of a certain seed only an olive tree is produced, and of a certain semen only a human being is developed, and yet they think that the heavens and those bodies which appear divine among the rest of the bodies came into existence spontaneously without the action of any such cause as produces plants and animals. Having thus examined this theory, Aristotle then proceeds to refute it at greater length. It is therefore clear that Aristotle believes and proves that things in real existence are not accidental. They cannot be accidental because they are essential, i.e., there is a cause which necessitates that they should be in their actual condition, and on account of that cause, they are just as they are in reality. This has been proved, and it is the opinion of Aristotle. But I do not think that, according to Aristotle, the rejection of the spontaneous origin of things implies the admission of design and will. For it is impossible to reconcile two opposites, so it is impossible to reconcile the two theories that of necessary existence by causality and that of creation by the desire of the will of a creator. For the necessary existence assumed by Aristotle must be understood in this sense, that for everything that is not the product of the work, there must be a certain cause that produces it with its properties. For this cause, there is another cause, and for the second, a third, and so on. The series of causes ends with the prime cause from which everything derives existence, since it is impossible that the series should continue ad infinitum. He nevertheless does not mean to say that the existence of the universe is the necessary product of the creator, i.e., the prime cause, in the same manner as the shadow is caused by a body, or heat by fire, or light by the sun. Only those who do not comprehend his words attribute such ideas to him. He uses here the term necessary in the same sense as we use the term when we say that the existence of the intellectus necessarily implies that of an intellectum, for the former is the efficient cause of the latter insofar as intellectum. Even Aristotle holds that the prime cause is the highest and most perfect intellect. He therefore says that the first cause is pleased, satisfied, and delighted with that which necessarily derives existence from him. And it is impossible that he should wish to be different, but we do not call this design. And it has nothing in common with design. Example, man is pleased, satisfied, and delighted that he is endowed with eyes and hands, and it is impossible that he should desire to be otherwise. And yet the eyes and hands which a man has are not the result of his design, and it is not by his own determination that he has certain properties and is able to perform certain actions. The notion of design and determination applies only to things not yet in existence. when there is still the possibility of there being in accordance with the design or not. I think you're raising question of the will at that point. I do not know whether the modern Aristotelian understood his words to imply that the existence of the universe presupposes some cause in the sense of design and determination, or whether in opposition to him they assume design and determination in the belief that this does not conflict with the theory of the eternity of the universe. Having explained this, I will now proceed to examine the opinion of modern philosophers. Wow. Well, when he's talking modern, he's talking 830 years ago. So let's see if we can fit one more chapter in. Some of the recent philosophers who adhere to the theory of the eternity of the universe hold that God produces the universe, that he, by his will, designs and determines its existence and form. They reject, however, the theory that this act took place at one certain time and assumes that this has always has been the case and will always be so. The circumstance that we cannot imagine an agent otherwise than preceding the result of its action, they explain by the fact that this is invariably the case in all that we produce. Because for agents of the same kind as we are, there are some moments in which they are not active and are only agents in potentia. They become agents when they act, but as regards Hashem, there are no moments of non-action or of potentiality in any respect. He is not before his work. He is always an actual agent. This made me think of the perpetual now. And as there is a great difference between his essence and ours, so is also a great difference between the relation of his work to him and the relation of our work to us. They apply the same argument to will and determination, for there is no difference in this respect whether we say he acts, wills, designs, or determines. They further assume that change in his action or will is inadmissible. It is therefore clear that these philosophers abandon the term necessary result, but retain the theory of it. They perhaps sought to use better expression or to remove an objectionable term, for it is the same thing whether we say, in accordance with the view of Aristotle, that the universe is a result of a prime cause and must be eternal as the cause is eternal, or in accordance with these philosophers that the universe is the result of an act, design, will, selection, and determination of God. But it has always been so and will always be so. In the same manner as the rising of the sun undoubtedly produces the day, and yet it does not precede it. But when we speak of design, we do not mean it in this sense. We mean to express by it that the universe is not the necessary result of God's existence as the effect of a necessary result of an efficient cause. In the latter case, the effect cannot be separated from the cause. It cannot change unless the cause changes entirely, or at least in some respect. If we accept this explanation, we easily see how absurd it is to say that the universe is in the same relation to Hashem as the effect is to the efficient cause, and to assume at the same time that the universe is the result of the action and determination of God. Having fully explained the subject, we come to the question whether the cause, which must be assumed for the variety of the properties noticed in the heavenly beings, is merely an efficient cause that must necessarily produce that variety as its effect, or whether that variety is due to a determining agent. That's a big point there. Such as we believe, in accordance with the theory of Moses, our teacher. Before I discuss this question, I will first explain fully what Aristotle means by necessary result. After that, I will show by such philosophical arguments as are free from every fallacy why I prefer the theory of creation ex nihilo. It is clear that when he says that the first intelligence is the necessary result of the existence of God, the second intelligence the result of the existence of the first, the third of the second, and so on, and that the spheres are all the necessary result of the existence of the intelligences, and so forth, in the well-known order which you learned from the passage dealing with it, and of which we have given a resume in this part. He does not mean that the one thing was first in existence and then the second came as the necessary result of the first. He denies that any one of these beings has had a beginning by necessary result. He merely refers to the causal relation. He means to say that the first intelligence is the cause of the existence of the second of the third, and so on to the last of the intelligences. And the same is also the case as regards the spheres and the materia prima. None of these preceded another or has been in any existence without the existence of that other. We say, example, that the necessary result of the primary qualities and roughness and smoothness, hardness and softness, porosity and solidity, and no person doubts that heat, cold, moisture, and dryness are the causes of smoothness and roughness, of hardness and softness, porosity and solidity, and similar qualities, and that the latter are the necessary result of those four primary qualities. And yet it is impossible that a body should exist with the primary qualities without the second ones. For the relation between the two sets of qualities is that of causality, not that of agent and its product. Just in the same way, the term necessary result is used by Aristotle in reference to the whole universe. When he says that one portion is the result of another and continues the series up to the first cause, as he calls it, or first intellect. If you prefer this term, for we all mean the same, only with this difference, that according to Aristotle, everything besides that being is necessarily result of the latter. As I have already mentioned, whilst according to our opinion, that being created the whole universe with design and will, so that the universe which had not been in existence before has by his will come into existence. I will now begin to follow the following chapters, my proofs for the superiority of our theory, that of creation out of nothing. And I think that's probably a great point to leave it for the weekend. Yeah, I think there's some deep thoughts here. And I guess some of the best examples we could think of today would be, chemical reactions. When you put something into a certain chemical, it's going to react a certain way. I think that the Aristotelian view is that when he calls something necessary result, boom, rather than determination. I think as we'll progress, we'll see. I'm sure that the Rambam's position is clear that it's not just addition, but also subtraction that we find in the Torah message of who Hashem is. Remember, as we've read in some of the books, you can never understand his essence, only his actions in this world. And this is why I say it's not only addition. You can't just say one element adds to another element adds to an element, like building blocks of Lego, say. You've got to be able to account for interaction of resistance. And I tried to look at collisions, from a vast perspective of matter, boom, colliding and interacting. Not only is it just the building like Lego blocks, it's accounted necessary result versus determination of Hashem. Hashem knows when to add resistance, and I think that this is most clear to true believers in Hashem. If you reach the point where you realize, some things I just can't reach out and grab, because we live in a day and age where it's considered most, with rational choice theory economics, I think that just infects people's mind to think like consumers. It's all about more, 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 more. The reality is Hashem knows better, and sometimes he needs to like chisel off certain behaviors, certain dispositions, certain practices to form a person. He knew all our days before one yet began, or before we were even formed in the womb. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We need to keep that Yira Shemaim. I think we need to realize that, divine decree still goes on, in the sense that the Mazal factor, without the blessing, if you want to call it, prosperity is just not going to happen without the blessing of Hashem. It's not about human drive, but determination, as we'll start to read, has to do with Hashem's will in molding, and we need to see the actions in our lives and in this world to truly come to the understanding of the complete and utter sovereignty of Hashem. We need to accept the fact that it's not just adding things together that make a necessary result, yet the input of impedance and discipline, is clearly a Torah position that Hashem, disciplines his people like a child, and will correct. And King David said, "His rod and his staff, they comfort me." And understanding that is an essential element. It's not just all about building you, but you got to have a God-birthed potential target in your life. If you're not aiming anywhere, you're not going anywhere. It's nice to see regulars keep coming back. Hopefully you guys are getting something out of this, but I think at this juncture, we're going to leave. We're going to leave it at this point. We'll be back on Monday with page 6178, or 54%. We're getting there slowly, and we will get there eventually. Like I said, I've never gotten through this entire book. I've made it 3/4 through. I think the first time I was about 2/3, and then the second time I was about 3/4, but I'm determined to get through it this time. But you can see how heavy weighted material, and somewhat, it may seem obsolete, but if you're able to pull out the virtue with which he attacks it, and just overlook the reality that it's 800 plus years old, you can draw out the profundity and the depth and the vigor with which he attacks an argument. In other words, he doesn't want to leave one stone not turned over. He wants to get to the bottom of the matter for his time with what was available, and hopefully we all do the same in our lives and go at it with that degree of intellectual virtue as we face our own lives. And if you learn to amp up that, can only be a good thing. And I hope Hashem's Mazal is just, passed out to all of you, and you're blessed. And I am still scheduled this weekend with my 2 broadcasts with Rabbi Kaufman, Rabbi Poston, and on Sunday with Rabbi Goldberg. So you'll see me there. But if not, we'll be back on Monday with Rocky Mountain readings. And so, and we will be back on Monday with more of the Guide for the Perplexed. And please be encouraged. Have a wonderful weekend, folks. See you Monday. Bye for now.